Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about the engineering portfolio and how to make a really good one. Let's get started. So today we're going to be looking at the LegitBots number 16535 engineering portfolio. So first page, what I recommend you do is first talk about your team a little bit. Talk about how many members you have, how many years you've been doing FTC or first activities, any awards you won, and general info like that. I'd also recommend if you have a website, put a link to your website or put a QR code, preferably a QR code because it'll be easier for the judges to use their phones and get onto it. If you have sponsors, throw a shout out to your sponsors because sponsors are really important. So when we're talking about the building design process, one thing I recommend you guys do is use a really good infographic / visual. Judges have seen for lots of times just basic flowcharts, and that's not really going to cut it. A really good way to capture your audience's attention is to use really good visuals like what we did here. So for example, here we used the gear and we actually used arrows for our engineering design process. So that is one way that you can get your audience's attention. And at the bottom, you can put a little small text just talking about what your process is. When you're doing build, one thing I highly recommend you do is talk about your prototypes. When you're talking about your prototypes, you not only show the judges how you improved as a team, but how your robot also improved and how you grew as an engineer. Here we have intake and we have slide prototypes. So this is really important because this not only showed the judges our design process for how we started with compliant wheels and then moved into surgical tubing, but it also showed the judges that we saw these problems at hand and we went through this engineering design process multiple times. And this is how we grew to become where we are right now. And let's talk about programming now. So programmers, this is something that's pretty important. Talk about your software engineering process. Now, you might be wondering, why though? Because what's the purpose? I'm not a build team member. Why do I need that? You're going to need it because the judges will start to understand what your code is, how it functions, and what the robot will do in a certain command. So this is one thing we did. We created a small flowchart and talked about our strategy for teleop, autonomous, endgame, and then we went through all the logic and then pretty much finished everything and then made minor tweaks. Use GitHub. GitHub, like you see over here, it's really useful, and trust me, it will save you hours on sharing code, and it's just super accessible. So if you haven't used GitHub already, I'd recommend you use that. Localization, PID controls, these are some of the things we talked about in our programming. Some things to also include is show pictures. Pictures are important, like I've said like about 5-10 times already, but they're really important. The judges will be able to see how your code works, and it'll also just make it look more beautiful. So let's talk about outreach. So outreach is something that is also pretty important. Many teams undermine this, but from outreach you can actually get a lot of photos and you can actually talk a lot. Because outreach is something that you have to effectively communicate, it's really important you understand what you did, how it impacted people, and talk about what you did specially and how it was very useful, not only for yourself, but for other people. For example, YouTube engineering videos are something that are very useful for a lot of rookie teams. So this team, for example, had 20,000 views by people who were enthusiastic about first and robotics. That is something that's really good because what that means is a lot of people were interested into the content, and the judges will see that and see that, oh, since they did that, people actually are interested and they're actually spreading first. One of the key parts of outreach is spreading first and spreading STEM, because our goal as robotics teams, for example, our own team BioBots number 14318, is to spread these two ideas across the globe as far as possible. So always try to include pictures that you can see right over here. And for example, COD and Java classes, what they did was they took screenshots of actual project work or the actual classes. And then same thing for mentoring and the Jane template. So one other thing to also remember is, and one thing I strongly suggest that all teams do not use Google Docs. Instead, use Canva. Canva is free, and it also allows you to use a lot, and then what I mean by a lot, I mean a lot of infographics, and not only can you upload your own materials, but it's just so much more easier to use. You can use Google Slides if that works, but I highly recommend you use Canva. So to summarize, here are some key parts that I would tell every rookie team to follow when doing the engineering portfolio. Number 1, have more pictures than words. Number 2, use Canva. Number 3, make sure you know what you're talking about. Number 4, keep it simple, stupid. And that's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.